Okay, we're reconvening the Lake Oswego City Council meeting that started last Tuesday. So would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mayor Studebaker.
Here.
Councillor Mans.
Here.
Kohoff.
Here.
O'Neill.
Here.
Wynn.
I'm here.
Lamont.
Here.
And Wendland.
Here.
And we'll also mention that we have staff present tonight. Martha Bennett, City Manager, David Powell, City Attorney, Ivan Anderholm, Parks and Recreation Director. And for the LORA part of the meeting, we have Sarah Zahn with UDP. Oh, sorry, Sidaro Sin on staff here, and Mick O'Connell.
Okay. We're going to begin with council business. The first item of which is an MOU with the school system. But before we do that, I need to apologize. Last Tuesday, after a couple hours of hearings, I indicated that I was frustrated that we had 13 more people who were going to testify. I'd like to be clear that my frustration was not from the fact that people were wanting to testify. It was because we had a very full docket, and it seemed like we would not get through it, and I was frustrated about that. As a matter of fact, we didn't get through it, and fortunately, the rest of the councilors are willing to have this special meeting so we can get through our business. But I want to be clear that I'm delighted that we were able to hear from everybody who wanted to speak last Tuesday. Okay, let's get on with the MOU. Who's going to be presenting on that, Ms. City Manager? Mr. Powell, are you going to be, or Ivan? Are you going to be talking? Who's going to be talking?
Yes, I will be talking, Mayor.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Ivan Anderholm, Parks and Recreation Director. The item that you have before you for consideration is the MOU, which is a Memorandum of Understanding between LO School District and the City of Lake Oswego, which sets forth the parameters and sets us in the direction for creation of a formal IGA between the two parties to build and operate a community center and aquatic center at the golf course. There was a joint meeting on March 16th between the City Council and the school board, and at that meeting, staff was given direction to create a memorandum of understanding to move the process forward and to outline, based on preliminary work that was done by Opsis Architecture under a contract with the school district, the basic format of an IGA for the two parties to move forward to construct and operate a combined recreation and aquatic center at the municipal golf course. Before you this evening is that MOU. And in that MOU, we'll go through some of the primary step or things that are in that MOU. So the MOU itself covers understanding between the city and the district that we will share in costs, direct costs related to design, engineering, and building of a aquatic and recreation center at the golf course. Specific to the MOU, says that we will share in those costs 50-50. The term of the MOU, expiration of the MOU was set at May 1st of 2021, but also in the MOU, it spells out that from the time of signature of the MOU that both parties have 180 days to work toward a formalized intergovernmental agreement that will outline a number of things within that center. So in that, I'm not going to go through all of them, but the basics of it are a competitive pool, swimming pool, 25-yard stretch pool, a warm water recreation pool, dry activity and exercise rooms, classrooms for the Parks and Recreation Department, offices for the Parks and Recreation team members, cardio weight room and gymnasium, And as based on the conversation between the city council and the school board, equal allocation of outside direct costs associated with design, engineering, and permitting and construction of the center up to a total of $30 million, which is $15 million from each side. Also covered in that formalized IGA will be the methodology for allocating savings and additional costs as we get into design development and engineering, contracting responsibilities and methodology, i.e. how are we going to contract for the construction of it, allocation of internal project management responsibilities, parties shared, the sharing of the operating costs and subsidies to operate the facility long-term, responsibilities for funding the maintenance, repair, and replacement of the facility, and also will address priority scheduling used for various elements within the center. Essentially, through the MOU, it also allows us to move forward with this selection of a design firm, putting out a request for proposal for a design firm through design, development, engineering into construction. In that process, the city will be taking the lead and will be the contracting agency with input from the school district. And we will have input from the school district both on the scope of that, on the selection of the firm, and then moving forward. The way that the MOU spells out and is in force until the IGA is established would be that we will ask for reimbursement of any costs associated after we do this from the district, and that they'll reimburse the city at 1/2 of all fees, charges, and expenses based on receiving an invoice and also supporting documentation. The district did look at this and acted on it at their June 8th meeting and approved the MOU. And so that's pretty much the grounds of the MOU moving forward. I do want to talk a little bit about the process. I think that there's some questions after the MOU is signed, what our process will look like. Assuming or if the MOU is agreed to and is Manager Bennett is authorized to sign it, we will move forward with a request for proposal. Like I said earlier, Lake Oswego School District will have representatives, as well as the city that will be on the evaluation team for those proposals. When we do that, City Council will see the contract. We will bring the contract after we select a design firm. We'll bring that back to City Council for approval. And then the timing on that, based on where we're at right now, in lieu of having meetings in August, will be the first meeting in September would be when that comes back to City Council. The other thing that I want to make light of, or not make light of, but bring out and make a point of, is that with this moving forward, we anticipate that we will be bringing a formalized proposal and looking for action and direction from council during that same meeting that involves design services for the golf course itself. It's important that we kind of do those design services in tandem so that as we move forward, we have those being designed and having communications between the two design teams. So with that, I'm available to answer any questions that there might be about the MOU.
Ivan, before you do that, the district's already approved the draft MOU.
Yes, they approved it on June 8th at their June 8th meeting.
Let me ask you a couple of questions briefly. There's going to be construction on traffic for roads and traffic over there. Is that going to be split between the city and the school district?
The costs that are associated directly with the project will be, yes. So.
And the other thing is that one other thing is the gymnasium was, I understood when we were doing this, was kind of a possibility. I assume that if we don't have the money, that's one of the things that will not happen. Is that correct?
Yes, what'll happen, and we've talked with the district administration about this, and I think that the discussion came out. The decision is that as we move forward with design development and engineering, we're looking at the design development of the entire facility. There is some economy to doing that. And then as we move through, as with any large capital project, there will be checkpoints throughout it where we're doing cost estimating and looking at what the cost to actually build it will be. And there'll be opportunities within that to look at if we need to add alternatives at the time of bid based on what those costs are anticipated to be. But the idea for moving forward would be to do the design and engineering for the full build out of the facility, and then be aware as we move through that if there are things that seem to be outside of the scope and resources that are available to examine those and put those either as alternatives or take them off of at that time that we bid.
Okay, thank you. Questions, please. Council Mans. Please, you better unmute, Council Mans.
I'll get it someday.
Yeah,
Mayor.
thank you.
This may be putting the cart before the horse a little bit, but the only real questions I've been asked is about the weight room and any sort of exercise room. If there'll be some equity or parity between men and women using those facilities. This may be from people's experience of going to private gyms. I'm not sure. Like I say, this is very much in the weeds for me, but I put it out there because I was asked. And you don't need to answer at the moment. Just keep that in your mind, please.
Councilor O'Neill, you had a question?
Not necessarily so much a question as we got to remind ourselves that we're a public entity that's going to be negotiating with a private entity. And Mayor, we need to send a very strong message that we want to build a parks rec building that includes a gym and a weight room, and we want to build it for 30 million or less. We've got to send that message. We can't waver from that message. We can't be iffy from it. Otherwise, we're going to find out, like I say, if you tell people you got 30 million to spend on this and a couple of the items are a hope, they're going to say, oh yeah, we can build it for 30 million. But maybe they actually could build it for 20 million and we didn't ask for enough. So let's ask for the world, let them come back. Let's not, look what we did at City Hall. Remember, that was almost 80 million. We're building it for 40. Maintenance center, 25 million. We built it for 15. So we have to be very careful on our messaging and what gets written. So I guess my first question is what did the school district sign off on? Did they sign off on the and hope maybe gymnasium, or did they sign off that we want a weight room and a gymnasium?
Can't hear.
Ivan, you got it. We can't hear you, Ivan.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So they signed off on the MOU that is in your packet. So verbatim, that one that was in the packet. And I think, Councilor O'Neill, I think what you're referring to is in the MOU, there's a statement about the gymnasium and cardio weight room as an add alternative. That was put in there. I don't think that is a major sticking point. I think that as we move forward with the IGA, that language can be changed. However, if council wanted to change that language in the MOU and strike the add alternative language after the gymnasium and cardio weight area, I think that the school district, based on conversations I've had with them, that they would be amenable to that. So I totally understand what you're saying, Councilor O'Neill.
Councilor Lamont, you got a question?
Yes, I'm on the same track as Councilor O'Neill. Councilor O'Neill, Councilor Wendland, myself, and Manager Bennett have all brought up that the initial cost estimates were broad. They were kind of pulled off shelves. I think now that it's going to be on our city track with our city design team that we can do better on that costing. But I just want to make sure it's clear. The 30 million is a cap for the city and the school district split. And the school district only has the 15. If this comes in less, which we want, and we want the full facility design so that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot with the capacity of this thing. But if it comes in at 31 or 32, we have extra funds in the bond right now that could cover that. If it comes in much higher, then there is no money. But I just want to make sure that we don't come back and say, oh, we only have the 30 when we have a couple of $1 million in that CIP for the parks to cover us if needed. But I think as Councilor O'Neill said, let's not promise that all this money's there. Let's just get this thing out for bid. But if it's to cap the school district at 15, I get that. I just don't want us locked down on 30.
I think though, if it came in over 30, you'd want to negotiate it with the school district. I don't think we should assume that the city would necessarily pick up all those costs.
Well, if it was a couple of $1 million and they only have 15.
I'm not telling you how it turns out, Councilor Lamont. I'm saying I wouldn't specify that right now. I would wait until that happens and then negotiate with the district about what to do.
Well, I'm not asking to negotiate with the district. The district has told us that 15 is it for them, period. And I'm looking at, if we come a little higher, we plan the CIP with the Parks Advisory Board to have extra to get this built.
Councilor O'Neill knows what I'm thinking about. I never assume that it has to be out of the city's pocket. So I always try to get the best deal for you that I possibly can.
Well, I don't know if school district's going to come up with anything more.
Yeah, and part of, to answer your question too, or your statement, Councilor Lamont, part of the IGA development that we're going to be doing, there's going to be a part of that IGA that addresses either efficiencies that we find within the budget as we move through the process, or cost overruns that are over the 30 million. So we are hopeful that we will be able to come to an agreement with the school district in that IGA on how we're going to address those types of situations. And that IGA, based on the MOU, will come back to the city council and school board for approval within 180 days of the signature. So.
Councilor Call. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Wen, you were next. Councilor Wen.
Thank you. I think Ivan.
Thank you.
Just had a general question, I guess, as we're looking at this, and of course, this MOU was drafted before, this thing called COVID-19, right? Has there been any discussion about, considering, assuming that, this is going to be changing our occupancy loads and things? Have we considered the financial implications of extra cleaning and sanitation that might be required as a result of, I don't know how long this pandemic will go on, but then secondly, is there a potential for, limiting the number of people that can be in the facility? And if so, would that hinder the school districts or the city's ability to utilize it as much as they, I just wonder if that's part of the conversation or not.
At this point, it has not been part of the conversation, but part of moving the project forward and coming to an agreement on the MOU, there is still operational. We, through OPSIS and working with the school district, had a broad stroke of operational information that was brought in. That work's going to continue as well. We're going to get into the weeds of what that means. Obviously, with the COVID situation that's happening right now and how that limits the participation and the number of people you can have in a facility, we will be looking at scenarios so that we can take a look and see what that looks like. And also, now that we've had this happen, I think that there will be consideration in the formalized IGA between the school district and the city on what it means if we get into a situation like this, and so that we'll have that information going into and have a better idea about that. I know that talking to my colleagues around the state, that a number of people that have a number of communities, special districts that have full recreation facilities are struggling with exactly how to operate them based on COVID. My hope is that that's not the norm for the next 50 years, but it's the out of the norm situation. But I think that it's pertinent that as we move forward, that we take into consideration some of these shifts that can happen that we've seen historically happen, so that we have a better, at least an understanding going into it. I don't think that there's any way to safeguard against it because we don't know what the next thing will be. But we will be doing some modeling on the revenue side and the income side of the facility moving forward. It's not, we're not going to take what's been done already and say that that's it. We're going to continue to refine that through the process.
I'm just thinking about potentially there could be, even though the building may not be fully utilized, much in the same way the city hall is not being fully utilized right now. I was speaking with Manager Bennett about janitorial costs, even though it's not open to the public, janitorial cost alone has increased significantly. So just thinking about some of those operation costs, considering that from what I understand that, we're going to already be saddled with that extra cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in my experience of operating recreation facilities, it's a little bit different. The general standard of what we do in a recreation facility, especially a pool facility for cleaning anyway. So I think that there's already, it's not going to be as substantial a delta between normal operation and COVID operation, because there are, especially when you're talking about water and pools, there's specific state guidelines that you have to meet that require more than once a day cleaning, and you have to do things. So I think that there is a difference, but we're going to take a look at that. But the delta is not going to be as great as like a city hall facility, because they're already intensely cleaned because of the nature of the activity that takes place in them.
Councilor Kohlhoff?
So I just had a general question about the MOU. I understand that once this is signed, then in that next 180 days, is that when the facilities group, both the city and the district, get together and iron out the various details of what's intended to be then presented in the IGA? Specific things such as what you've mentioned, the type of water, for instance, that you would have in the pool, if it's chlorinated, isn't going to be a problem. If you go into salt water, then it might be, that kind of thing. I'm assuming that level of detail is what's happening with the facilities task force or whatever it's called. Am I right?
Yes, you're correct. So taking the basic concept and the basic concept with the squares of this goes here, the pool's here, the warm water pool looks like this rectangular thing. What'll happen from this point out is that blocky square thing will become very specific with input from the community, and it'll define what those shapes look like, what their purposes are. And with that, we get a higher level of refinement of what the potential costs are. But then it also helps us on the operational side to project what we think, how we think we can operate it. So the details, we are talking about moving into the detail portion of the process right now. In design development, that's where we do that, where we refine that design.
I have one more quick question. So there were some specifics in the MOU. Is there sufficient flexibility in your mind with the MOU that in the process of getting in the weeds, you discover something is really bad idea, and you find something is a really good idea, and you want to change? If there's mutual agreement, even if it had to come back to council, if there's mutual agreement, is there enough flexibility to go ahead and try to see if that something else works?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, I believe that there is flexibility, and the issue is as we move into that design development, there are going to be things that come out that are going to further define what what the facility looks like. And I think as we move forward, if we discover things, especially through community input, that, you know, the community's really not interested in an aspect that's in that larger concept, we're definitely going to take a look at that and see if that can't be, you know, transferred to another area where maybe the community wants more of some type of service. So that's what that design development is for, is so that we can really test the concept, start to refine it, and find out what the community wants and what their desires are. So
Thank you. That definitely answers my questions.
Councilor Wendland?
Thanks for the clarification on everything. My concern is on the IGA. First, I would hope that we could do it sooner than 180 days, but I think I would have liked to have seen it at 120 days and maybe 90, but I know our attorney wants to make sure every dot is I'd or whatever, I is crossed, whatever. He's in the details, but I would suggest that we move quickly on these things. And the reason why, I think, is it will give us, both the city and the school district, more certainty of what is in the IGA as far as financial obligations moving forward. And I don't know if you're going to include the entire IGA that's just related to the rec center and the pool, or whether we're going to review the whole IGA that we have, which includes other things like taking care of, I think we take care of school playgrounds and some other things that are part of the overall IGA. And I would love to have one document that includes everything versus having to go and having a separate agreement. So maybe you could comment on that.
our plan was our work plan was to develop two separate documents simultaneously, though. And I think the important part of that is there's enough complication to the rec aquatic center that it should be a separate agreement. And my opinion on that is based on, as we move that agreement forward, that facility itself, I think, is significant enough that it should be separate should both or either one of the parties want to make changes to it, that we don't have to open up the entire IGA. But our work plan is to develop and refine the other IGA that we've been operating under simultaneously, so that the timing is that we can get an overall picture, council and the school board can get an overall picture of the relationship and the agreement relationship that we have with the district for all services. My recommendation is that we have a separate IGA for this facility, because moving into this facility, the significance of it, to have an agreement that we can open up specifically if issues arise around this facility, I think will serve us better in long term than having it wrapped into a larger single IGA.
Right. And I think that's smart thinking, and I totally support that. But if you're doing, basically, I don't want to have the 1923 document torn up, and then there's things that we haven't figured out. If you're going to work on them simultaneously with the intention of signing them together, I think that's highly desirable. And I know Attorney Powell will have to put his blessing on everything, and those are not easy. I understand that, but we're going to have you kind of jump out on a limb a little bit, David, and see if we can't move this quickly, because I think we're going to be talking about budgets in September. The school district is going to be talking about budgets in the future, and I think we need to make sure that we have, while it's not huge significant money, it's enough money that I think both entities want to know what they're signing up for and what their future is about. So both from an operating standpoint and a financial standpoint. So thank you.
Jackie, let me have Mr. Powell speaking, raise his hand in sudden motion.
Yeah, I did hear. Yeah, I wanted to address Councilor Wendland's comment about timing. Yeah, no one intends to drag their feet on this, but please understand this is different from starting off with a deal that's been fleshed out, you know, what you're going to build, what the parties are going to do, what their obligations are. It's a matter of drafting and negotiating agreement language. That's one thing. Here, first to be worked out is what's going to happen. And so a lot of that timing and the reason why the projection was for 180 days is much of that has to be done first. But we certainly understand both the council and the school board's desire to move through this promptly, and I think staff will be responsive to that. But again, this is there's a lot to be discussed, as Ivan's been outlined, before you really put pen to paper, and so a lot will depend on how quickly those agreements and those determinations could be made.
Okay. Councilor Mans.
Oh, thank you. Two things. I agree with Councilor O'Neill that at this point in time, $30 million is the limit, thing one. Thing two is, given the financial situation because of COVID, both for the school district and for the city, more for the school district than the city, but nonetheless, I think it's imperative that as we go through this process, we're very cognizant of where we end up. I honestly am not sure that I want the city to be responsible for more dollars. I don't think we're far enough along in that process to make that decision at this point in time. The final thing that I've mentioned, having served on the Lake Oswego Tigard Water Partnership Committee for all of these years, is that these are complex agreements. Granted, this is not the water partnership, but there will always be details that need to be worked out. It's very, and I'm sure Mr. Powell will speak to this, it's very important that whatever we do within that 180 days after signing our MOU provides a good framework for a good partnership moving forward. And with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Further questions? Mr. Anderholm, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, go
I'll
ahead.
make a motion if we're ready.
Yeah,
Yes, I believe we are.
I'll make a motion to approve the memo of understanding for the Lake Oswego Recreation and Aquatics Center as presented by staff.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion?
the only thing is, I would agree with the comments about the take off the included as bid alternatives. And I know that may create a lot of heartache, but I agree with Councilor O'Neill strongly that when you put a number out there and they will come to that number, I bet you all the bids will be $29,954, $56,222. So we want everything. I didn't think the little kiddie pool at the Lake Grove Swim Park would cost $240,000, but that's how much money we had to spend on it on the school board. And I'll be darned if it all came in at 239, 237, 236.
What's your
So
request?
I'd recommend you amend the motion to delete the as-bid alternates from the MOU.
Are you,
Okay,
is
so-
that acceptable to you, Councilor Lamont?
Yes.
So amended.
All right, so we've got that amendment. Is any other discussion on this? All right, Madam Recorder, will you call a roll, please?
Will, and I did have Councilor Mans as the seconder of the motion, and you agreed with the revision to the, okay,
Yes.
Thank you, City Recorder.
thank you. All right, Mayor Studebaker
Yes.
and Councilors Mans,
Yes.
Kohlhoff,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Nguyen,
Yes.
Lamont,
Yes.
and Wendland.
Yes, with great enthusiasm. Mark that down.
All right.
The motion passes unanimously.
As long as we're on this
Thanks,
topic,
Ivan.
as long as we're on this topic, we're gonna have one person as liaison to the Design and Development Committee. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. You can do that now or later.
I would like to move that we appoint Councillor Wendland to be our liaison.
Second that.
Thank you.
All right, does anybody have any discussion on that? You want to indicate that he's a turkey and shouldn't be there, or you want to go ahead and point?
Well, they know that already.
We have to amend the motion.
No, it's not, okay. All in favor, raise your hand, please. Okay,
Do I get a vote? No.
Madam Recorder, everybody raise their hand, so it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do a good job for us, Councilman Wendland. I know you will.
We're counting on you.
I shall.
We don't want to put any pressure on you.
Thank you. I know.
Now, on item 5, that was a consent agenda. It's all been approved. So we can skip that. We'll go on to item 6, which is information from council. Does anybody have anything they want to give Councilor Lamont?
Yes, we had the Parks Advisory Board meeting yesterday. It was very good. As we know, they are one of the most active and involved groups. They had several goals that they had revisited. One was on the off-leash issue with dogs. Staff had brought it up to a certain point and then realized with COVID they couldn't proceed. There's so much back and forth about dogs on leash, off leash, that they decided to wait until the end of the year if staff catches up, or to move it to a 2021 goal. So folks out there that are worried about, are we doing something with getting dogs off leash or on leash, that'll come later. The big one that they do want to keep pushing for this year is safe routes to schools. They've appointed Sarah Ellison to be the liaison to TAB, our Transportation Advisory Board, and would like to have not only her go to the next meeting, but to have a joint meeting with the TAB to talk about safe routes to schools, prioritizing that list and getting them moving this year. The last thing is the Hallinan situation. There was concern. I think we needed staff, and it's either the police department or parks, to give feedback to the board about the condition of the house that was abandoned. And as long as it's secured and boarded up and kids aren't getting in there because it's just sitting there, that was one thing. The second thing they told us was that it's off the market. And third, they see some people out there doing surveying, so they just wanted to make sure that the city would try to take another meeting with the owners to see if they can do a deal. But they were concerned about the house and the surveying. That's it. Oh, Councilor Wynn?
Oh, no, I was going to say,
I'm sorry,
Oh.
Councilor Wynn, I was muted. I'm sorry.
okay. I was just going to say that looking at the agenda, I'm noticing that there's item 7.1, the council briefing on the city's declared state of emergency. I know that at our last meeting, I believe we allowed the declaration of emergency to expire, but I'd like to see if there's any appetite for further discussion, considering we haven't heard what that report would be, and considering what the current state of affairs is right now before we make a decision not to.
Discussion on what, please?
On the current emergency declaration for the city.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Councilor Kohlhoff.
Well, I would agree with Councilor Wynn, and maybe Manager Bennett could tell us what she believes would be the purpose to extend it. I have the inclination to extend it one more time. It seems to me that things are better, but they're not better. And we're getting reports back of people to wear a mask or not wear a mask, and why isn't the city taking the side of people that ultimately, of course, the governor is now taken off the table. But there's a level of, there seems, at least from the outside of City Hall, a level of need almost for us to speak out affirmatively about what we expect and what we hope for. And so if Manager Bennett could speak to that, I would actually like to see it extended, but is that fair?
So I think when we declared the state of emergency, we did so because we were making pretty I was going to say last minute, but that's not the right phrase. Rapid decisions about city facilities that were open and closed and city programs. And so we needed to make sure that it was clear that you had granted us the authority as staff to make those decisions. I think now we are in the realm of most of the decisions that we're making about city programs and services are already things that are either delegated to staff as code or are things that we can use your regular council meetings to bring to you. So we've got time, unlike before where we really had literally hours to make decisions. We now have time. Originally, we also thought that some of the funding would have to we'd have to have a declared state of emergency to receive the funding. Now it looks like the state's declaration is sufficient to cover us for the flow of funding. So I think at this point it really is a council decision. I believe that the current declaration expires next week. I want to say the 24th. Is that right, David?
June 24th.
If you wanted to do it, I would definitely say that you ought to let it expire when Clackamas County moves into phase 2. At the earliest, that'll be July 11th. So I kind of think if you do it, this is the last time, absent something unusual like a significant outbreak in the community. The only reason I would want you to sort of reserve it is because if we did have a significant outbreak, we might want to declare another state of emergency to be able to respond. And so it might be nice not to have any confusion between the declaration we needed in March and any future emergency that might arise. But so it's really a policy call.
So, Mayor, is there merit to us expressing what we believe to be good policy regarding wearing the mask through now and the 24th when it does become mandated?
Sure, there is. I thought we made it fairly clear, but it doesn't hurt to do it again.
Okay, then I would make a motion that we commend our population to wear masks in public or where they can't socially distance. Because evidently we're hearing that there's a lot of trouble surrounding it, and there shouldn't be. People should not be harassed or bullied one way or the other, but if that is our policy, it would be my motion to make that.
Is there a second?
I'd second that motion.
Any discussion? All right. Yes, Councilor Wendland?
Does that mean a mask all the time or outside or inside or what? I don't,
I
aren't we
think they
just,
said, I think the state has said they'd like us to wear a mask inside buildings.
Public.
right? Aren't we?
And it's inside very
th-
specific buildings,
Public buildings.
like grocery stores and shops.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
is that what you're saying, Councilor Clawhon? You'd like to,
I mean, is ours going to be different than?
A little help. My thought pattern is that we would be following what has already been laid out, and that is in fact what we are asking of our citizens.
okay, Councilor Wendland, does that answer your question?
So,
No. So how different is that than what we're supposed to be following as far as the metro area guidance
It's
now from
not,
the governor?
it's not. Councilor Kohlhoff is simply saying it would be well for us to emphasize that by making it a policy.
Oh, okay.
Is that
okay.
correct, Councilor Kohlhoff?
that's
Is there any discussion on that? We have a motion made and seconded. Or Councilor Nguyen?
Yeah, I was thinking, I mean, when I brought this issue up initially, I was just thinking, and I agree with Councilor Kohlhoff, is that just if we were able just to kind of extend again, it doesn't really change how we do business right now, because I think that on the one hand, if we're saying that we're lifting the emergency declaration, yet the public really, I mean, is the public still, are they allowed to be able to come into the city hall, number one? Number two, how close are we to be able to return to council meeting in the chambers? And so I like the idea.
You guys are covering my report for me. Here I was going to give you a report and you're asking me the question, so I don't have to talk anymore. So right now we are in phase 1, and let me also say that the executive orders from the state right now exempt municipal buildings. So even though we have state guidelines that apply to other privately owned businesses, local governments have to make decisions about their own operations. During phase one, the city is what we call part one to try to eliminate confusion, where City Hall itself is open by appointment only. Probably have about 40% of the office staff in the office at any given day. When we move to phase two, we are going to be unlocking the door, but with occupancy limits in the building. And we're still going to be encouraging people to do services that we can do remotely, do them remotely. And we're still going to be asking for anyone who's going to come in with more than 1 or 2 people to make an appointment so that we can have sufficient staff and sufficient space available to them. So because we know during phase two, we'll still be required to have physical distancing protocols, and we still have limitations on occupancy of our conference rooms. The biggest change for us when we move to phase two really is that we can go from having meetings of up to 25 people inside to up to 50 people. So that is probably the time when we'll start in-person council meetings, because at this point, with a cap at 25, once we put the 7 of you plus David and myself and Anne Marie in a room, we've taken up 10 of the spots, and it's not really publicly accessible at that point. If we can only have 15 people show up to a meeting. So that's kind of our thinking right now, is that when the state moves to phase two, then we'll go back to live meetings. The other thing is, I think you've heard me say this, let me say this out loud, is right now the way that technology is in Old City Hall, and let's just say we don't want to invest in any more technology in Old City Hall, it's almost impossible to have anybody on a meeting like this remotely. You can be on the phone remotely, but you can't really be on a Zoom call remotely because the way the council chambers is set up. So it's kind of all virtual or all in person for you guys if you really want your meetings to work. So that's why I'm not anxious to do it before we can get 50 people in the building.
We may never come back.
Councilor Lamont?
The first question is, I think I read the governor's order right. So in the future, the 3 metro counties are going to open at the same time, so we don't get caught in the thing with our businesses at the New Season Shopping Center.
Yeah, it's not just that. It's it's also true for the Multnomah County businesses. Yeah, I go to a person who cuts hair in Multnomah County, and she's worried about losing all of her clients to Clackamas and Washington County stylists because she can't open. So it'll create some fairness. Also, most of us who live in the metro area, we travel among all 3 counties to lead our lives, and so it will reduce confusion for the public at large. And lucky us, we have businesses in all 3 counties, so it'll clean things up for us as well.
And then the second part of the question is then, when do we think, again, phase 2 would happen if we're all working together?
So the governor said that it would be 21 days from Friday at the very earliest. So Friday's the 19th of June. My math says that's the 11th of July. Would be the earliest we would enter phase 2.
You notice that Clackamas County have filed a letter to open early.
Yeah, Clackamas County applied yesterday, or they approved the application yesterday, but that was before we heard from the governor's office that they were going to approve them all at once.
Okay.
So I understand why they've done it, but at the same time, I think we should expect that the state won't approve it until Multnomah County is ready to go to phase 2.
Okay, we've got a motion made and seconded on declaring our policy to be basically what the state has asked us to do. Is there any more discussion on that? All right. Yes, Councilor Wynn.
If I heard you right, Manager Bennett, is that if we don't adopt this, or maybe I should say it this way. So for example, June 24th comes around, the governor's executive order requires that in all public buildings, meaning like grocery stores and things, people wear face masks. But if we don't say anything as a city and say we also require face masks in City Hall, for example, would it mean that we could not require it?
This is the David Powell question. We've gone at the staff level, we've gone round and round and round and round. What we've decided is that we will offer services to folks if we can either physically distance or they're willing to wear face coverings. So if we have someone for any reason, because there are people out there who for medical reasons or other reasons can't wear a face mask. And so we don't want to deny them access, but we also want to keep everybody else safe. So the requirement is either we can keep folks 6 feet apart, or we can require people to wear face coverings. So that's been our approach. My understanding is the face covering recommendation is for those times when you can't be 6 feet apart. But I understand why the governor's approach is the way it is, because that's, and I could bring Scott Wachter or Dr. Sani back to talk to you about it. But the reason it's really important is there are situations like when you're in the grocery store aisle, or in our future when we have patrons in the library, where it's really tough to constantly stay 6 feet apart from people. You end up having to come closer. That's why wearing face coverings is so important. And also, I kind of believe wearing face coverings is going to become the new polite thing to do, right? Like opening the door for your mom. It'll be like wear face coverings to protect your friends and neighbors.
Okay, would you call a roll for this?
If I could just read the motion that Councillor Kohlhoff gave, so you're clear on what you've got.
Right.
I heard command the population to wear masks in public or when they can't socially distance. Councillor
think
Kohlhoff, does that reflect what
I
you
think
said?
she said commend.
Command, not command.
This is why we read them back. Thank you. All right, I will go ahead and call the roll. Mayor Studebaker,
Yes.
Councillor Mans,
Yes.
Kohlhoff,
Yes.
O'Neill,
No.
and Wynn,
Yes.
Lamont.
He said no.
He said no. Okay. And Wendland.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 5-2.
All right. Next item is reports from officers. Anything?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that we will be staying online with your meeting on July 7th. We're hopeful to do your first in-person meeting on July 14th, which would be about the Tryon Creek wastewater treatment plant.
So you've got, have you given us about all the information you need to on your report?
Yeah, on COVID, that's all you really need to know.
Okay. So we're going to adjourn the city council meeting and convene the LORA meeting at this point. I don't think, do you need to call a roll?
No, sir.
I didn't think so. Okay. So we're going to, that first item of business is the North Anchor project update.
So, good afternoon, Chair Studebaker and members of the board. Before we get into the MOU, I've asked Sarah Zahn, the Director of Development for Urban Development Partners, to give a brief update on all of the work that her and her team have been doing, and it'll really help provide a good context for the MOU. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Well, good evening, Mayor and councilors and staff. It's an honor to be here this evening with all of you. I have a presentation that I'd like to share on my screen. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Give me a moment. Okay. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Wanted to give you all a brief update on the status of our project as we're moving through this and getting ready to sign the MOU with the city on our project. So as you'll recall, our team is comprised of Urban Development Partners as the lead development in the lead development role, with Hacker Architects working with us on the residential project, Nathan Cooprider Architect working with us on the hotel, and the Atticus Hotel as our hotel operator partner. Let's see, figure out how to scroll down here. This site map, just to remind you of all the context here. So we have 3 parcels. Parcel A is our proposed hotel parcel, and parcel B and C are our combined residential parcels. our design update. And when we first submitted this proposal to you, as you recall, we had a proposal that consisted of residential, hospitality, and office. And since we've been working through this a little bit more detail, we have elected to eliminate the small office component that we had and look at parcels B and C as being a residential property. And really, a couple of things drove that decision. First of all, the smaller parcel, looking at that as an office parcel, it really didn't lend itself to a great floor plate for office use. And so that was one issue that we were having, was we just didn't feel like for the amount of space we were dedicating to office that we had a sufficient amount of office space. It would be a very expensive, small office building to build. And then with the onset of the pandemic and COVID-19, we felt that at the same time, really leaning into office was a little bit more of a challenge, and that we felt that really looking at this as a residential opportunity was more appropriate. So our proposed program is roughly 80 units of residential apartments, a 60-room hotel on the westernmost parcel, and approximately 99,000 square feet of ground floor retail and restaurant across the B Street elevation. Wanted to give you a little bit of an update on parking, as I know that this is a key issue for the city and, for us, frankly, as developers. So we're really working closely with staff to evaluate parking requirements and options. Our code required parking for this current program, which bridges residential, hospitality, and commercial, depending on where it all lands, under your current zoning code, we are looking at approximately 130 to 140 parking stalls as required. Our current design has about 70 on-site parking stalls, with an option for an additional 40 stalls of below-grade parking. And that's something that, if you recall, in our initial proposal, we talked about, the option of looking at additional below-grade parking as something we would want to discuss with the city. We do have the ability to have approximately 30 on-street parking spaces that can be allocated to meet our parking count. And the other key thing that we're talking about is the ability to meet some of our parking count with making agreements for off-site hotel valet parking. So this would involve us looking to adjacent property owners to make agreements to meet some of our parking requirement by signing agreements to do hotel valet parking in adjacent sites. And this is something that the Atticus Hotel has done successfully in McMinnville. You see frequently in downtown Portland, where hotels have agreements with adjacent either surface parking lots or parking garages to meet the hotel parking demand overnight, which often works very nicely in conjunction with, office uses or daytime uses, where those property owners can actually work with a hotel to use those spaces that would otherwise be vacant as hotel parking. So, we are working as well with our parking consultant to look at whether a parking study can help us assess parking need based on proposed uses, as a way to also, talk with you and the city about how do we address parking need relative to the zoning code. So just a quick update on where we are with our design. We have been working closely with Hacker on the design for our residential component of the property, and they have actually completed a concept design. We are underway in selecting a contractor partner right now. We actually have interviews next week with 2 potential contractor partners. We're also moving forward on a number of our due diligence items. So we've completed a site survey and a geotechnical exploration. We are working toward doing some additional environmental testing as well. And then Kittleson and Associates is working with us on our parking and traffic analysis. And then on the hotel side, our architect is working toward finalizing the concept design for our hotel parcel. So I know the hotel is something of extreme interest to the city, and given where we are in the pandemic, I just wanted to provide you with a little bit of an update on where we are in light of everything that's going on. So we're closely monitoring the hotel market in light of the pandemic. It's obviously been a big ripple in the hospitality market, and something that we want to, keep close track of. But we are in ongoing discussions with HVS, which is a hotel-focused market study group regarding market conditions and demand. We are also, continuing with discussions around the Atticus Hotel about our partnership. We feel good about them as an operator going forward. They are obviously really focused right now on keeping their McMinnville Hotel viable. They opened back up for business last week. And the good news is that they've seen strong bookings and have felt good about their ability to recover. I think it's a challenge for any hotel operator right now, but they are a smart group and they've done a good job preparing themselves for both the closure and the reopening. So we've had good discussions with them. It's been a little bit delayed as a result of them just needing to focus on their existing business, but they are definitely still interested in working with us. So that's good news. And the other thing is just in conversations with HVS, again, the market study group, and looking at the market, a projected hotel opening in late 2022 and early 2023, we feel like we are relatively well positioned at that point to open a hotel. ADR and occupancy levels are expected to return to what we call 2019 levels, which, while not escalated, and at perfect conditions, we feel good about the fact that at that point, hopefully they will be, we'll have kind of gotten this behind us and be able to be back to business. So we are able to, at least at this point, project forward on our financials toward a ADR, which stands for average daily rate, and occupancy levels back to where we are essentially before the virus. Also just wanted to give a quick update on community outreach, which I think is and will continue to be an important factor for us. So we sent out our first kind of outreach email to who we would call neighbors and stakeholders, which is a list that we compiled together with some data that you at the city have collected on this project, and just sent an initial update to the city or to the stakeholders saying, this is our team, this is our rough plan. We'd love to have you participate. Please sign up for email updates on, on an ongoing basis. And if you want to contact us, here's how to do it. We are on the agenda to meet with the First Edition Neighborhood Association on July 1st. And in addition, we are planning to do a virtual meeting probably mid to late July with any interested neighbors and stakeholders. And that would be a Zoom format, you know, similar to this, where we're able to provide some updates and then have comments or questions from any of the participants. And then in an ongoing manner, we plan to have monthly email updates, as well as one-on-one outreach to immediate neighborhood and stakeholders. So we're very focused on making sure that we're proactively talking to our neighbors and stakeholders in the First Edition neighborhood. And then, of course, as we get into our requirements, we will have a required neighborhood meeting around the time of our pre-application. So this is our rough schedule for next steps. Obviously, we're at the point of signing an MOU, hopefully with the city here, and we'll have over the summer and the fall the opportunity to negotiate and sign our DDA. We are engaging by July 1st into schematic design. We'll be preparing to submit for our pre-application conference in the fall, with an expected land use submission before the end of the year. Hoping for land use approval and permit submission next spring, and then starting construction late summer, early fall of 2021. And we're working with our contractors right now on construction schedules, but I would expect that the rough schedule will be somewhere between 13 and 15 months from start of construction to completion. So that's a really quick update from us. Happy to entertain any questions that you have. And I know that Sid is also prepared to talk to you about our MOU, but big picture, we're really excited about this project. We're enthusiastic about working with the city and feel really great about the team we've put together and our ability to work collaboratively with the city on moving this project forward.
Okay, we have a bunch of questions. Councilor Wayne.
Thank you. Great update, Sarah. We appreciate it. I think my question is, what are your thoughts on the shifting from office to the residential? Do you see those as a mix of studio, 1, 2, 3 bedroom, or is it luxury, or is it what's your concept on the residential part?
Yeah, good question. Our current thinking on the residential, and we'll continue to unpack this a little bit more over the coming months as we really dive into the market. But our current thinking is that we are looking at a mix of apartments here, probably predominantly 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. And one of the unit types we found to be very successful is what we call a 1+, where it's a unit that has a 1 bedroom, but it also has an office space. And especially in today's market, with more and more people working from home, and as we look at a population looking to maybe downsize, we want to give a little bit of a wiggle room or space for folks to have the ability to have an office space or even an office nook. So that is a unit type that we're focused on as well. But we do feel that there's a strong office market or residential market here, and feel like that kind of urban, walkable neighborhood aspect of this site will be really successful.
Councilor Lamont.
So the first question is like Councilor Wendland said, this is a great project and we're excited and we want to thank you for keep moving it even though we're in trying times. And my first question is on fast tracking. We all have brought this up, how anxious we are to get this going. So if you just keep an eye on our process and your process, see where you can tighten things up, including maybe the northwest corner when you do your long range scheduling is now empty. The Arts Council has moved out. Yep. And that building is ready to come down. So if you want to split your timing on some of that, please take a look and see if there's any fast track potential. The second thing is on the parking. I don't know if you've had a chance to talk with staff about the parking lot that we own across the street. We own about 20 or 22 spaces there. It's something to think about because it's sitting there, it's not heavily used, and it's a public parking space. And then the third thing is just if there's a chance in your pricing to provide different products for different people, I think is where Councilor Wendland was going, just so we don't have one big luxury development again, so we can hit a lot of markets, especially when they're downsizing and wanting to stay in our downtown. So thank you, and if you can fast track, let us know. It's a good idea.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Councilor O'Neill.
Sarah, I'd also like to thank you. Very, very excited. I think your project's going to be a home run. I think the general environment of downtown Portland, where was at one time the cool place to move, I think they're showing people that the suburbs rock in the best town in the state. So I'm very, very excited. I think you'll have a very, very successful project.
Thank you, Counselor.
Anybody else? Yes, Councilor Mans.
I'd like to echo what Councilor O'Neill said. Earlier, I mentioned that Councilor Wendland and I were sitting downtown having coffee today outside. And it was a festival atmosphere. I was kind of blown away. It was wonderful. So we thank you for your faith in our city and can't wait to see the product.
Great. Thank you, Counselor.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Okay. Sid, you had a presentation to make?
I did. I will be very brief in the spirit of fast tracking these things. I just wanted to remind the board that the MOU serves as Urban Development Partners' opportunity to do their due diligence, and it also really sets kind of the expectations and different tasks that the city and UDP will be participating in. And more importantly, it really sets kind of the stage and the issues and some of the other things that we'll be discussing as part of our disposition and development agreement. So really we get to see what does the deal look like before we really get into the disposition development agreement. Some of the major elements is where the goal is to have a signed DDA by September. What LORA's obligations include is providing a title report, any of our environmental reports that we've been doing in the past, as well as working with UDP and providing them input and feedback on their proposal. UDP's obligation is really to fine-tune what their initial proposal was, looking at what the design looks like, the parking, the open space, public spaces, looking at the schedule that Sarah's kind of outlined and getting to the details of that, as well as looking at what the operational performance is. And that all kind of leads to what our joint obligation is going to be, which is to develop a financial plan. How can we make this project work and successful? As part of that, we'll also be providing an appraisal. And one of the other things that we heard was to also look at potential, how can or can we do workforce housing? And so to look at that, do an analysis of that. But with that, our recommendation is to authorize the executive director to sign the MOU. And I'm available for any questions.
Questions, anybody? Councilor Wendland?
Can I actually make a motion and then we can talk about it if you want?
Okay,
I'd like to authorize the LORA Executive Director to sign the Memorandum of Understanding with Urban Development Partners for the North Anchor Project. With
Second.
great enthusiasm.
With great enthusiasm.
okay, I guess you get the idea, Mr. Sin.
Thank you. I do.
All right, any discussion on this, please? Okay, hearing none. We've got a motion made and seconded. Madam Recorder, will you call the roll, please?
Studebaker,
Yes.
Members Mans,
Yes.
Kohoff,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Nguyen,
Yes.
Lamont,
Yes.
and Wendland.
Yes, unanimous.
Yes.
Mr. Powell, do you think we've given enough to do with this agreement for this and also for the pool?
More.
Choo choo.
We didn't hear you because you're muted. Sorry, you wasted.
I'm sorry, I was muted there. Yes, that will be plenty, Mayor. Thank you very much.
Okay. Is it anything anybody else wants to say or do before we adjourn? All right, thank you very much all for this special meeting. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.